Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear student teachers, I am Rashid Salim with lecture number 24 of Functional English 1. And today we are going to write short reports. But first, let me ask you some questions about the previous lecture. I hope you enjoyed learning about recipes. And you enjoyed all that food vocabulary and action verbs and the use of some and any, and I'm sure that you wrote some recipes, and some of you might have even tried chicken Kiev. Did you? So how did it taste? I'm sure it must be pretty tasty, and you are a good chef, I know. Okay, in lecture number 23 we learned to use some food vocabulary, we learned some action verbs, we learned the use of some, any, a, and an, and we also looked at some sample recipes. We analyzed them, we learned how to write a process, and then finally I gave you a task to write your own recipe. So this is what we did in lecture number 23. Now let's move on and look at the objectives of lecture number 24. In lecture number 24, we are going to identify various kinds of reports. So we'll see what kind of reports, common reports are there, and how we can classify them under different headings. We'll also analyze some short reports for its various elements. And finally, you will plan and you will write a short report of your own. So this is what we plan to do in lecture number 24. So stay focused, pay attention, and fasten your seat belts, because it's going to be quite a challenging flight, I'm sure. Okay, before we go into the nitty-gritty or the details of today's lecture, let's have a look at some questions that I want you to consider. So the first question naturally comes to our mind is, what's a report? What is a report? So what do you think is a report? The verb report is to inform. It means to inform, to tell. But we know that the word report has got some level of formality attached to it. So normally when we say reported or report, it seems that there is a little bit of formality there. Why do we write a report? Well, there could be various purposes, but normally reports are written in order to take certain decisions. So whatever facts and figures and information is given in the report, it helps the decision makers to look at that information and take certain decisions. It is also useful for keeping a record, a written record of anything, any activity that you have done. This written record can be useful for various purposes. It could be useful for future improvement. It could be useful for review and assessment. So later on you can look at it and you can find out what went wrong and how you can improve. It could be useful for others also, because maybe you worked at a project and now you are not a member of that project anymore. Someone else takes over, and he or she might look at your reports and find out where you left, and then he or she can chalk out their plan accordingly. Similarly, this record keeping is also useful for technical information. For example, if you have installed AC in some building and then presented a report, this report will give the technical details. So later on in future, if there is any repair work, or if there is any repurchase of any of the equipment, they can look at that technical information and accordingly they can take decisions. So basically report is to inform and to record. So what can we record? There are lots of things we can record. We'll talk about it in detail later on. But let me ask you a personal question first. Did you receive a report recently? In recent months, recent days, did you receive any report from any department or any institution? No? Think again. Maybe you did. Okay, if you did, those of you who say that they have received a report, what was it about? And those of you who say that they didn't receive a report, maybe one thing that you did receive was the report card of your children who are studying in some schools. So on 31st of March, or it could be any other day for private schools children, you received the result card or the report, assessment report of your children, didn't you? Well, that was a report. Maybe you didn't think of it as a report. You always called it a result card, but it was a result report or an assessment report or a student report. And it reported information about the progress and performance of your children's academic skills and academic knowledge. Okay, so maybe you received some other reports as well. Maybe you received a financial report, a bank statement from your bank, or maybe you received a financial report. Maybe you received a test report. You went to a laboratory and you had some medical tests, and afterwards you received a test report. So report, what I want to emphasize is that report writing is a common feature of our lives, and very often we have to write reports and we receive reports, although we seldom pay attention to it, and seldom do we think that it is important. The reason is because normally we only focus on skills that are required for exam skills. So we know summary writing, we know essay writing, we know translation from Urdu to English, because these are normally tested in the exam. Whereas report writing, although it is tested at some levels, but usually this kind of report writing is very different from the reports that we receive in our real life. Well, in today's lecture, we are going to look at reports that are commonly and practically written and received. So this is really going to be helpful in our real life. Okay, have you ever written a report? Yes, probably you did, because as I was talking earlier, probably you wrote a student's performance report or the assessment report or their report cards. Sometimes you write comments on the report cards about the performance of your students, don't you? You do. Okay. Anyway, did you write a report, or have you ever written a report? And what was the message, purpose, and audience of the last report you wrote? Do you still remember that? So first think of the last report that you wrote, and then try to think of the message, purpose, and audience. For example, if it was the result card or if it was the student's report card, then the message was to inform about the performance of the kids in the academic year 2013 and 2014. What was the purpose? The purpose was to there were multiple purposes. One purpose was to inform the parents about the performance in individual subjects, but another purpose was also to help the decision makers, that is the principal, the vice principal and the administrators of your school, to take the decision whether to promote the child into next class or not, or to take other remedial measures, what went wrong and what could be improved. And who were the audience? The audience were multiple. Of course, the primary audience of this report were the parents, but the students themselves were the audience, and then you had the teachers probably, and also the administrators, the school administrators. Okay, so you can think of primary and secondary audiences. Primarily, report card is for the parents, but this report card is also important for the office personnel in order to keep the record, for the clerks, for example, in the office. Therefore, some information is regarding the record keeping. And of course, this report card is also useful for the class teachers, for the subject teachers, for the heads of the department, for the vice principals or the headmasters of the school. Okay, so whenever next time you receive a report or write a report, you should answer these questions, because it will help you be clear about the objectives of why you are writing a report. Because normally what happens is that we write reports for exams, and while doing it we forget the real purpose, the real audience of the report, and we only think about the examiner, we only think about the grammatical mistakes that we will make in it, and we only think about imagining the content. We don't think of the real situation in real life. So I want you first of all to unlearn, if you have learnt anything about report writing earlier, and try to think of it as a real task, as a real life task, and think of real audiences, real purposes and real messages, and it will be much easier to write your own reports. Okay, so these were some questions to consider. Now we come to the first question. I asked you a question, what is a report? Now it is difficult to give a precise definition, a comprehensive or exact definition of a report, and it is not required. So I'm just going to give you the important features of report, and that will help you form an idea about a report. Okay, first of all, a short report informs the reader about a specific subject to help make a decision. So as I said earlier, that that a report usually is to inform. So its purpose is to inform, and the second purpose is usually to make a decision on the basis of this information. Okay, and it is about a specific subject, and it is for a specific audience. Okay, here I have written the word short, and actually in today's lecture we will just learn how to write a short report, because long reports could be more than 10 pages, and they are really very difficult to learn, and but they are very important as well. So we won't do that. We will just learn how to write short reports, reports less than 10 pages, mostly 1 or 2 pages short reports, very brief reports. Okay, a short report is usually no longer than 10 pages. And it consists of facts and sometimes an analysis of the facts as well as recommendations. Now this is important thing. So it consists of facts, right? Not opinions, not imagination. It consists of facts, the real events that took place, the happenings, and sometimes an analysis of the facts. So you report a fact and then you analyze, and here you see when you analyze it, there could be different angles, and maybe some of your opinion is involved. And then as well as recommendations. Most of these reports, as we talked earlier, are helpful for decision makers. So if you are talking about an issue, about a problem, definitely you are going to give or suggest a solution, or you are going to recommend some steps that can solve this problem. The third point is that the information is arranged in a memo format with both first and second level headings. Maybe these are two technical words. Memo format, there are usually two formats. One is called the letter format and another is called a memo format. Letter is usually written when you are sending a report to an organization other than your own. So it is used for external correspondence, whereas a memo format is used for a report that is circulated within the organization. Memo is the short for memorandum. If you are sending a memorandum or something that everyone should remember, or if you want to inform everybody, you may also call it a circular. You want to circulate a piece of information within your organization, and for that you will use a memo format. And it involves both first and second level headings. First and second level headings means headings and subheadings. And usually these are numbered and lettered, ordered list of headings. We'll talk about it in detail. So a report is basically, it informs the reader about a specific subject to help make a decision. It is less than 10 pages if it is a short report, and it gives facts, analysis of the facts, and sometimes also the recommendations. Normally it is written in memo format, but it could also be written in a letter format, and usually it has first or second level headings in it. And readers of these reports expect the information to be written clearly, concisely, and completely. So you see, this is not fictional piece of writing. So no one is interested in your, you can say, complex and imaginative metaphorical language. Rather, you should write clear, simple language and phrases in order to communicate. Concisely, right? It should be brief, but it should be comprehensive. Completely means that no important piece of information should be missing, and concisely means that no piece of irrelevant information is included. It is brief, it is to the point. So concise means to the point, and completely means that no relevant information has been missed or skipped. So this is what a report is, and now probably you learn that this is an important piece of communication, because with the help of these reports we can bring changes and we can inform the decision makers. Okay, now let's look at some common reports. You might have heard the names of these reports very often, like a book report, news report, accident report, weather report, lab report, sales report, financial report, science report, event report, project report, progress report, medical report, legal report, review report, test report, assessment report, error report. These are just some out of many more. So you can imagine that we can write a report about anything. If it is about a book, then it is called a book report. If it is a piece of news item, it is based on some news item, then it is called a news report. So you have news reports printed in the newspapers, in the magazines. Accident reports are normally written by the traffic policemen, traffic sergeants. Along with it, you also have sometimes witness reports. So the witnesses, they report what they saw. If there are any witnesses who witnessed an accident, they will write a witness report, and the sergeant would take down note down what they said, and also note down the position, the location, the timing, and the other relevant information of the accident. Okay, weather report, as its name suggests, is about weather. As very often you hear it from television or on the radio, that weather report gives a report about information about weather. Lab reports, students often have to write such lab reports when they conduct an experiment in a lab. They write the complete procedure of what they did and what they found. Sales reports involve monthly or annually or biannually or periodic reports of how much sale occurred in a business setup. Similarly, you have financial reports, science reports. Science reports are based on some science problem. Then you have event reports. If an event took place in your school, for example, there was sports week, or there was a prize distribution ceremony, or the oath-taking ceremony of prefectorial board, or maybe parent-teachers meeting, or heads of the departments meeting with the principal. These are all events, and usually we have to write the reports at the end of these events. Then you have project reports. If you are working on a particular project, you have to note down all the information so that you can record it, and then it can help give information to the decision makers. We have progress reports, we have medical reports, usually written by the doctors, legal reports, review reports. Review reports could be review of a book, review of a film, review of an art piece. Then test reports for medical tests. Assessment report, one example of assessment report is the result card of your students. Error reports are usually automatically generated for computer errors, which are reported to the companies who made those softwares or hardwares. Okay, error report informally is also called a bug report. So you see, there are so many reports out there, and for every purpose there could be a report, and accordingly there are so many different names. So how to try to make sense of such a chaos, such a confusing number of reports out there? So how to make sense out of it? Basically, I think you can classify all the above reports into trouble reports, investigative reports, project reports, and event reports. So mainly you can say that there are mainly 4 classes of reports, and within these 4 classes you can have subcategories, of course. Trouble reports are if there is an accident, an incident that took place. For example, if there had been a fire incident in chemistry lab of your school, and you are asked to write a report about it, that would be a trouble report. So trouble report could be about safety hazards, it could be about health problems, safety, security, and it could be any trouble actually. Investigative reports, as its name suggests, are to investigate, to find out the cause of things, or to find out the culprits behind a crime. So for example, if there is a plane crash, you find out the reasons why it crashed. Or if there is if a terror attack took place on a building, you investigate and you find out who are responsible for this event, this incident. Then you have project reports. If you are working on a particular project, you have launched a new website, you have opened a new shop, you have started working with a new course, that a new course has been set up in your school, there has been a training workshop. So these are all different kinds of projects that you can work on. And usually for project reports, first you have to write a proposal. A proposal is a short report that you write in order to convince the financial sponsors of a project. So you convince your decision makers that why you want to take this project and how this project will help, what kind of problems this project will address, how much money is required for it, how much time will be required, and what are the resources that are required. For example, if you want to start a new class in your school, you might be asked to write a proposal for that. So you can tell what class will it be, how many number of students will be enrolled, what kind of infrastructure will be required, how many teachers will be required, what will be the expected cost, what will be the duration of this project. So you will give complete details that are required for making decision about starting a new class. That is called a proposal. Once your proposal is accepted and you have started working on the project, you are normally required to submit progress reports to inform the decision makers or your sponsors about the progress of your project. And normally these reports are written periodically, maybe after every week, after every day, after every month, after every 6 months, after every year, depending on the length of your project. If it is really very short project, maybe you don't have to write progress report at all. But normally, if the project runs into months or even weeks, you have to write 2, 3, or 4 progress reports. And once your project is complete, you write a completion report in which you mention all the details. So you see, project reports are also very important. Then event reports are probably important for us as teachers, because sometimes we are asked to write an event report, an event that took place in our school, college, or in our local area. We are asked to write a news report to report that event to a newspaper. So these are some kinds of reports, and all kinds that we learnt earlier, common reports, they somehow fall into one of these categories. Okay, so what points should we keep in mind when we are writing a report? You remember earlier I said that you should, before you write a report, you should plan it. And in planning stage, you should look at your audience, you should look at the message of your report, and you should look at the purpose of your report. So once you are clear about message, audience, and purpose, that is the map of your report, it will be easier and for you to write, it will be easier for you to write effective reports. And the second point that I emphasized earlier is that don't write a report for examination purposes or for assessment purposes. Instead, write a report for a real life situation. Okay, and for that, do the necessary research, take careful notes, record all necessary background information, collect relevant factual data, and interview key individuals. So if you are supposed to write a report on any social issue, for example, you should take down notes. Don't take it casually. Take it formally, officially, and you should actually note it down in a notebook. Otherwise, you might miss lots of crucial information. Necessary background information is important, and you should collect relevant factual data, not just your opinion. Facts and figures are really very important for any reports. Okay, second thing that you need to keep in mind is to anticipate how the audience will use your report. Anticipate means expect. So try to imagine, try to visualize how your audience will use your report, what kind of decisions they need to make, and accordingly you can provide them with the relevant details. You should also consider how much your audience knows about your project and what types of information they most need. Because sometimes you know, decision makers, they are usually very busy people, and they sometimes are not really very technical people. You as a professional, you as a technical expert can guide them and provide them with the essential details that will help them make decisions. Okay, number 3 is important. Be objective and ethical. Objective means that instead of stating your opinions, state the facts. So be impartial. Avoid guesswork. Do not substitute impressions or unspotted personal opinions for careful research. So you see, merely giving the personal opinions of the people or your own impressions, these are not really very important for taking any decisions. Decisions are normally taken on the basis of hard facts and figures. And you should avoid biased, skewed or incomplete data, and double check all facts, figures and specifications. So make sure that there are no errors, no mistakes in the factual data that you are presenting, because otherwise it may lead to a wrong decision. Okay. All right, so we continue and look at few more guidelines here. Once you have planned, you have thought about your audience, you have researched it, you are going to organize your data carefully. Include a purpose statement, findings, a conclusion and recommendation. So these are some important parts of a report. You must include a purpose statement, why you are writing this report, findings, what did you find out after doing your research, what conclusion did you reach, and what are your suggestions or recommendations. So normally these parts are included in your report. So be careful and organize your information in this way. Earlier we talked about writing clearly and concisely, so this cannot be overemphasized. Use an informative title, subject that gets to the point right away. Write in plain English, use international English, adopt a professional yet personal tone, and do not include unnecessary background information. So I told you earlier that your information should be complete. So no irrelevant information should be given, but no relevant information should be included, should be missed or skipped. And you should use plain English, not high flowery language or literary language or metaphoric or idiomatic language, because that might confuse the people. Instead, you should be simple, clear. And finally, use appropriate format and visuals. Make your report look professional, readable, and easy to follow. So it should be user friendly. And help readers locate and digest information quickly. Be consistent in your design and format. By consistent, it means that you should consistently follow the same font size, the same font type, the same font weight for headings, subheadings, and the body, and the same margin on the sheet of paper, because it will make it user friendly. And you should also include only the most essential visuals and design important place visuals appropriately. So in reports, it is usually very important to organize your information in some visual way, through some visual graphic, because usually you can compress information visually. For example, you can include, you can give tabulated information in the form of a table. You can give information in the form of a diagram, like a tree diagram, or an illustration, or other graphics that show the relationship between various elements of your report. Like you can have a pie chart, you can have a bar graph, you can have a map, you can have tables, you can have charts, illustrations. These things really help, but don't provide unnecessary visuals. Instead, just give the visuals that are crucial for making decisions. These things are important because a graph, for example, gives you a quick trend. A line graph, for example, can give you a quick trend, and it will be easier to make decision on the basis of it without going through the complete report itself. So these are few things that you should keep in mind when you are writing a report. So probably these are lots of things that you need to keep in mind. Okay, now we move on and look at the usual parts of a short report. I call it usual because short reports might not have all these elements, or might have few more elements than these, but these are the common ones. Normally you have one title page, a separate title page that gives the subject of the report, the person to whom you are submitting the report, the person who is submitting the report, or the committee or the people who are involved in researching and writing this report, and the date when this report is submitted, and name of the company if you work for an organization or the company. So these kind of information usually go on the title page, because reports are recorded and they are archived, and they could be used even after months, years. So usually they are placed in the folders, and if you have a title page, it is easy to sort them out and store them. So in order to store and sort reports, it is better if you include a title page, although it is not absolutely a must. Okay, the second element that you should include in your report is the overview of your report, or the summary of your report. Then you move on to another section of your report, which is called the introduction or background section of your report. Usually these sections are separately have separate headings. So you have a heading as overview or summary, then you can have the heading of introduction or background, then you can जी वापस आते हैं और लास्ट सेंटेंस को जो है वो रिपीट करते हैं. Then you can have a heading of introduction or background, then the next section could have the heading of discussion, and finally you could have a heading of conclusion or recommendations depending on the content of your of this section. Finally, sometimes the report is really very short, but it has some relevant attachments. So if you are attaching a timetable with it, or any itinerary, or any information, crucial piece of information that is, so if someone wants to look at the detail of the piece of information that you provided in the report, short report, then they can look at these attachments. Okay, so these are usual parts of a short report, and now the 4 sections that I have highlighted here, they are really crucial. You can skip the first one and the last one. And now I'm going to talk about these 4 sections in detail. So what should you include in overview, what should you include in background, discussion, and recommendations. Okay, so let's look at the first section. After the title page, you have an overview. And the overview is a brief summary which tells the reader quickly what the report is all about. It is sometimes also called as an executive summary, because this summary is for the executives, for the decision makers. You know, decision makers are usually very busy people, and they want to take the decision. Sometimes they don't have the time to go through the whole report. So whatever your findings are, whatever is the conclusion, it should go in the summary. So the summary should help them if they want to take a quick decision. They can just read the summary without going into the details. It identifies the purpose and the most important features of the report. So in summary, you don't include everything, you just include the most important features and the purpose. And it states the main conclusion and sometimes makes recommendations. So it's like all the crucial piece of information which is required to make a quick decision, that is included in the summary. It does this in as few words as possible, condensing the report to several key sentences. This is the most important thing. We have learnt the art of summarizing earlier. We had a complete lecture on summarizing. So this is really important. You should find out what is crucial, and then you should be able to write the crucial piece of information in only several sentences. So if your report is for 5 pages, it should be summed up in just 5 to 10 sentences. That's all. It is usually best to write the overview last after you have written the background, discussion, and conclusion, because only then you have an overview yourself. Remember, the overview may be written last, but it is always placed first in the final report. So overview is important, although it is placed first in the report when you present it, but normally overview is always written at the end of your report. Once you have written all the other sections of your report, it will be easier to give an overview. So overview is just like an aerial view of the city. Rather than going into the detail, rather than going into the detail, you can just give the specific points. And you should write the overview after you have written every other section of the report, although you would place it earlier than the other reports. Okay, so this is the first section of your report, the overview. Let's move on to another important section of your report, which is called an introduction or background. The background sets the scene for your reader. Okay, so it gives the context. So if you are talking about a problem, it gives the context, and it gives the very basic information. For example, if it is an event report, or even if it is an accident report, you must give the time and place where this accident took place, and you must give the names of the actors who are involved in this incident. For example, if there was a fire incident in your school and you were asked to write a report about fire incident in the chemistry lab, You can tell which chemistry lab it was, what timing there was, which class was visiting, who was the teacher accompanying them, who were the lab assistants and lab attendants at that time. So you must give the place, time and actors of that particular time. And there is no need to confuse the overview with the background if you remember that the overview provides a brief summary of the entire report, whereas the background introduces the subject and explains the reasons for the report. So there is a difference between an overview. An overview is the summary of the complete report, whereas background is setting the context or giving the crucial piece of information about an event or the project. Okay, according to the requirements of your report, the background should try to answer such questions as who, what, why, where and when. So I have already given you this, that in background you tell when something happened, where something happened, why it happened, what happened, and who were involved. The background information should place your reader mentally in the picture before he or she has to consider your findings and conclusions. So it should set the scene, set the context so that your reader can understand the findings and conclusions. The next section is discussion. The discussion presents your findings. You should have as much evidence like facts, arguments, details, data and results as a reader will need to understand the subject. No more, no less. As I said earlier, all relevant information must be provided and all irrelevant information must be avoided. And there should be no repetition. You must develop these findings in an organized, logical manner to avoid confusing your reader. Normally what happens is that when you are working on a project, you are well aware of so many things, but don't expect that your readers know everything. So you should organize it in a particular way. There should be a method behind it. There should be a logical order. Otherwise your readers will be confused, because things might be clear to you but they might not be clear to your readers. You should also present your findings imaginatively to hold his or her interest. Okay, earlier I was saying that you should not use literary or high flowery language. Instead you should use plain simple international English. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't use your imagination at all. Use your imagination in order to make your report interesting. During the discussion you may want to use headings and subheadings if you are discussing different aspects of the subject. So merely giving a report in long essay format is not really very helpful. Normally you would like to give headings, subheadings, and the information will be in the form of bulleted lists or numbered lists. And as I said earlier, there should be proper visuals, tables, graphs, charts that should help them. During the discussion you may want to use headings and subheadings if you are discussing different aspects of the subject. Each heading or subheading must be an informative mini title summarizing the material covered in paragraphs it is meant to introduce. So it's like each paragraph is going to be like a mini report, and each heading is going to be like the mini title for that section or for that paragraph. So don't write it in the form of an essay. Instead you should have proper headings, subheadings, and numbered and ordered list and other visuals. Okay, then the final section of your report is usually called conclusion or recommendations. Conclusions, as its name suggests, briefly state the major points that can be drawn from the discussion. If there is more than one conclusion, state the main conclusion first and the remaining conclusions in decreasing order of importance. So the most important conclusion should be given first, and the least important conclusion can be given at the end. Although recommendations are not necessary part of a report, you may include a discussion of your recommendations in this part of the report. Well, it depends. If it is an investigative report, maybe recommendations are important. It depends on the purpose and the audience of your report. Normally, it is good to include recommendations. Okay, so here you have looked at the guideline, you have looked at various sections of report. Now we look at one report, and this is going to be an example or sample report for you. And because this is a news report, so it doesn't really have headings and subheadings as I advised you to have. But still, there are paragraphs, and each paragraph is unified, and it is cohesive. Okay, I'm not going to read out the whole report to you. This sample report is also provided to you, has been provided to you as a handout. Okay, now I want you to spend some time to read out the handout, and before we analyze it. Okay, it will be difficult for you to read it on screen because the font size might not be big enough, or it's of course not easy reading such lengthy reports on the screen. If you feel comfortable, convenient, go ahead. Otherwise, download the accompanying handout and read it before you move on any further with this video. So what you should do is you should pause your video here, read this report first, and then you should replay it, and only then it will be easier for you to follow what I am going to say. Okay, I hope that you have gone through this report. Now I want you to analyze this report. So let's look at the first paragraph first. What kind of what purpose does this paragraph serve? You are right. This paragraph is like the summary. It gives the summary or an overview of the whole article. So once people go through this summary or an overview, they will decide whether they want to read this news report or not. So some people might move on to the next news item or news report after reading the summary. The others would might be intrigued by it, and they would like to read the whole report. Okay, the second paragraph, it gives the main finding. So this is part of the overview, the main finding, main conclusion of this report. The third one gives you the evidence or the procedure through which this information was collected. Okay, the fourth one also gives the details of the procedure. Okay, the next one gives the findings, the research findings. Okay, and so does the next. It gives the valuable feedback of some of the subjects in this research. And the next one also gives the findings, and the final one, it gives the conclusion. Okay, so you can see that easily this report can be analyzed for its various sections. And if when you are writing a report like this, it will be you will keep this in mind. Okay, so this is one kind of report, and if you can recall earlier, I said that writing a report card is also involves report writing skills. And as teachers, we often have to write report cards for our students, and usually we have to add 1 or 2 sentences as our comments. Usually the rest of the information is already given in the form of a table or a chart. So the names of the subjects written in one column, we just have to add the marks in individual subjects that students got, and finally we have to sign it. The only thing that we need to include here are our comments. Now on the website you actually have report cards, comments banks. So this is like a repertoire or a storehouse or a bank of useful phrases that you can include in your report cards. I know as busy teachers, usually you just repeat, and it is difficult to do justice with all the students because usually we have large number of students in our classes. We have really very large classes, and it is difficult even to remember the names and behavior of the student, individual student. But despite all that, we should learn the relevant phrases so that we don't repeat the same sentences again and again, and instead we use some interesting new ways of giving our feedback about the performance of the students. Now usually these websites provide some useful expressions. I have provided one handout along with this lecture. You can download it, and this handout will give you some sample sentences that you can write on report cards as your comments. Now these ready-made comments should not be used without care. They should be used very carefully, and only you should pick out the sentences that are relevant and appropriate. Don't use them at random. Don't use them randomly. Instead, be careful in choosing these sentences. Okay, now in these report cards you have to write so many things, but usually you have to commend or appreciate the effort of the students. So if a student has really performed well, simply writing excellent, very well, keep it up is not enough, because we know that these are repeated sentences and they don't really, they are not really very interesting. So instead you can write such sentences as performs well in everything he undertakes or she undertakes, has good organization of thoughts, grasps new ideas readily, accepts responsibility well. So rather than just saying that he is responsible, you can say accepts responsibility well, gets along well with this class rather than just writing social, takes an active part in discussions rather than just writing at participation, shows pride in his work, her pleasant personality and cooperative attitude are an asset to our class. So these are just few sentences that I have provided in the handout. You can normally look at these phrases and you can use them in your own report cards. Now sometimes you don't have to, you don't want to commend your student. Instead, there are some other functions. I'm not going to give you the phrases for these functions, but I'm just going to have an overview of what these functions could normally be. And then you can, it is advisable that you make note of such phrases in a notebook. You can make a phrase book, and then you can write sentences under these headings. So you should write all the sentences that go under commendations or appreciation. Okay. Now you can write sentences about work habits. Okay. For example, your student, does he follow group dynamics? Does he keep the deadlines? Does he submit assignments on time? Does he do the homework regularly, etc., etc. Then playground behavior, self-confidence, poor attendance and tardiness. Tardiness means coming late, delaying. So you know, some students, they use the delaying tactics. And if you think that your students, they need extra help, what kind of sentences you can use or phrases you can use? If you think that your student is an average student, what kind of phrases could be useful here? What kind of phrases could be useful for a new student in your school or in your class or in your section? And if your student is showing progress, maybe he is still not perfect, not getting positions, but if he is showing progress when you compare his or her performance with his previous performance, what kind of sentences or phrases you can write. So actually you should be on the lookout for these report cards comments, and you should make your own storehouse or a repertoire which you think you can use really or actually use in your real life. So what I want to say is that don't take report writing as a theoretical topic. Instead, you should think of writing a report for real audience, for real purposes, with a real message. Okay. So with this we come to the end of report, and I would like you to write reports in future, and I would give you assignments and homework later on based on different kinds of reports. Okay, thank you very much. We look at the summary now. In lecture number 24, we learned how to identify various kinds of reports. We looked at different kinds of reports like bank reports, sales report, medical report, legal report, financial reports, assessment reports, event reports, and then we put all those kinds of reports under, we classified them into 4 different kinds of reports. And if you can recall, those 4 kinds are investigative report, problem report, project report, and finally we had the, I've forgotten, maybe you can recall. What was the 4th kind of report? Yes, an event report. Okay, thank you. We also analyzed a short report for its various elements, and we learned how to plan, and you looked at the guideline for writing a short report. Okay. Now I have skipped the memo format because this one is really easy. It's usually what happens is that when we are teaching reports in our schools classes, we focus too much on the format and grammar and punctuation, and we forget the real message, audience, and purpose of the report. So you can look at any format, you can use it. That shouldn't be very confusing. The important thing is the real meat of your report, the real content of your report. So with this we come to the end of lecture number 24. Hope it has been quite useful and you have learnt lots of new things, and hope that in future you will be able to write short reports of 1 or 2 pages. Thank you very much.